Mayor, the downtown multi-use stadium, of course, has become a very controversial subject here. I mean, did this catch you by surprise? How controversial this thing had become? I mean, maybe especially from the neighborhoods where the idea from that study thought it should go. Did this catch you by surprise?
Well, a couple of things have been interesting about this issue, whether you're for or against it. There's a national narrative, right, against stadiums. And when it comes to like Major League Baseball and the NFL, I mean, I totally understand that. I think what's been surprising is, we're talking about minor league soccer, and in New Mexico, very much same thing as the Isotopes. And again, whether you're for or against it, it's just different than the Raiders moving to Las Vegas. And I think to the extent to which people have tried to make these the same thing, I think has been very surprising. To me, this is a local question. And if a neighborhood doesn't want it, we're not going to do it there. I mean, it's not, in a sense, that complicated for us. But when you layer in all of these other, studies in the New York Times and this and that, none of them have anything to do with minor league soccer in Albuquerque. And so that certainly has been surprising. But I think that is a good reason of why we put it on the ballot. We could have done this without putting it on the ballot. And myself and the counselors, we all agreed, let's give the voters the choice. And so, look, it's been a great discussion.
Can I interrupt first, quick sec? I'm not quite clear what you mean by you could have done it without going to the voters. What process was there otherwise?
It's just a city council vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, those bond issues, depending on the type of bond, but this one would have been 7 votes, which was the same amount that it passed to go to the voters. With 7 votes, we could have just done it. And there was a lot of pressure to do that. And we said, no, let's send this to the voters. The people should decide, and we should have a public debate on it. So I think by that score, was a great idea, sending this to the voters, because I think we're going to get a definitive answer, and we'll honor that answer.
Was there possibly a step before going to the voters, though, Mayor, as you being the honest third broker, watching out for the finances of the city and taxpayers' wallets and all that kind of thing? Should we have not said to the guys, go out and find some private money of a certain percentage first, then we'll talk about going to the voters, maybe half of it, a third of it?
Well, unfortunately, the bond cycle just didn't allow for that. So, the issue is coming out of the budget year that we had in the spring, and then you get the financial forecasts, and then you have to put everything you want on the ballot for November. You have to do that in August. Mm-hmm. So we basically had 2 months to decide. And that's, for better or worse, that's just the way that city finance works. These are refinancing bonds. And if you don't reissue them, obviously the money is not spent and that tax increment goes away. Mm-hmm. And so we had 2 months to decide. That's just, the way the bond math works. And so, again, we could have delayed it for many years, but I think it was important to have the discussion. And, last summer too, it's hard to remember, but it was a time of optimism. Crime wasn't quite as bad. Homelessness wasn't quite as bad. And we were coming out of the pandemic. And I think we were all looking much further down the road to the future for our families. And that was really part of the reason why it's like, okay, well, let's let the voters vote on this in November.
Mm-hmm. In the Journal poll, I'm sure you're aware of, 50% of the voters were not crazy about the idea of the 2 front-running locations in neighborhoods. About 50% were opposed to having them in those neighborhoods. If, in fact, this does not pass tonight, is that idea gone about going into those neighborhoods? But what happens after that?
Well, we always committed to a community benefits agreement with the neighborhood, and Barelas Community Coalition was open to that. So it's not that they weren't opposed, but they were open to the discussion. San Jose did not want it. So we said, great, we won't go to San Jose or Broadway. Mm-hmm. And I think if it fails, though, look, at the end of the day, we're not going to put it where people don't want it. So I think it's not going to go, if it goes anywhere in any of those places. So you've got to look at vacant UNM land, and this would be the team really, or, land outside the city. But they're going to have to do that. It's going to have to be a private thing. There might be some public partnership in there, but we're not going to bond for $50 million. But I would just mention the Rail Runner. Core to the idea of a stadium was to have it along the Rail Runner line. And so I still think, like, in general, that's a good idea. And so whether it's the Balloon Fiesta or whether it's a stadium, doing big public entertainment amenities along the railroad is a good idea. So that does, that's always a preference for me in general.